So this painting right here, it's actually titled John's Chair, but it is a view of his studio space, and within it you can see a lot of the works that are in fact on the gallery walls. And so when I had the great pleasure of discussing this exhibition with Peter's family, I was inspired by the prolific amount that Peter painted, but also his clear love for the landscape of Timiskaming region. Clearly, the geography of the place and the heartbeat of the place never left him. So I find his views inspiring as they're sort of a love letter, I think, to the region itself. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Susan, Peter's daughter, to share with us a few words, and lucky us, even a few of Peter's words. Thank you.
My father would have been moved, honored, and excited to be here. He really would. He loved Hillberry and the surrounding areas. His parents were born here. He grew up here. He went to school here. He met and married my mom here, who was also born here and raised here. And her mother was born here too. Hillberry was where we vacationed most as a family. We were very big numbers. And though he moved for school, work, and his growing family, my dad's creative imagination stayed here in Hillberry. With the glorious Lake Timiskaming summer days, as he described it in a journal, very much inspiring him. In the 1960s, my dad started painting, with a focus on Northern Ontario, mainly this area. In the early 1980s, he began writing his series of historical books about this area. He would literally write from morning to night, all on a typewriter, often on the dining room table. The click-clack of his typing remains vivid today. He also painted, and almost every day he journaled. Some time ago, he passed one of his journals along to me. He wrote in this journal from October 1979 to September 1980. I started reading it a few months ago. He wrote about his family life when we were young, children in Midland, and he wrote a lot about his early days and memories growing up in Hillberry. The inspiration for the books he later wrote and his paintings feel very much reflected in this early journal. And I want to read a passage that lends itself well to today. On April 26, 1980, he wrote, "No place truly comes to life until it is capable of acting on our imagination. We need more artists who evoke Canada, not using forms, colors, words which originate elsewhere, but those which are provoked by the immediate country and people. True, concrete, imaginative representations will suggest universal truths. The particular, the abstract, the material, the spirit, male, female, night, day, and so on, are nothing without one another. Happy paradox. Northern Ontario, though somewhat settled, will be incomplete until people make it live in the imagination. Tom Thompson and his 7 followers already have done something for Algonquin, Georgian Bay, and Algoma country, a start. Think of what Thomas Hardy did for Dorset, what Faulkner did for his world, what Quebec writers are doing, what Margaret Lawrence and others have done for the West. Imaginations are starting to focus on Toronto, on Southern Ontario, next, the North. The North does excite me, it is alive. Maybe in some way, I will stumble across or work across some method or means of expressing my honest feeling." He wrote this in 1980, 45 years ago. Today, his honest feeling about the North, about the shores of Timiskaming, are present in this gallery. Thank you to the gallery and to Melissa. And thanks to my dad for sharing his visions, memories, and creative imagination through art.
45 years later, when we see what's happening in the world, how important it is that Canada does see itself as its own country with its own things to offer, somewhat outside of influence from other places. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Chris Oslund,
I'm so happy to be here today as we celebrate Peter through his art, his writings, and his passion for the North. Over the past couple of weeks in preparation for today's reception, I have reminisced about my conversations with Peter, looked back with fond memories on our historical adventures, and reflected on the significant contribution he made to preserve our history. Peter had a keen sense of these bonds that tie us together. He had a great love for his hometown, the Temiskaming region and its people, and he wanted to share that love through his paintings and writings, and he did so with great success. Peter laid the foundation and really set a very high standard for the preservation of our history through his writings. His 8-volume set entitled Temiskaming Treasure Trails documented our region's history in great detail from its pre-contact times to the end of the Second World War. But these volumes were more than just dates and events or a dry academic dissertation on the development of Northern Ontario. Peter captured the lives of the people. In my humble opinion, historians really are storytellers, and Peter was a great storyteller. In addition to his extensive research of primary historical documents, he made a conscious effort to preserve the stories of everyday families, stories and oral traditions that would otherwise would have been lost. My first recollections of Peter go back to the mid-1980s. Peter had just released his book, Silver Centre, The Story of an Ontario Mining Camp. Peter had a way of bringing history alive. I was so intrigued by his map of Silver Centre that I asked my dad and grandfather if they would take me there. So on a beautiful fall day, we headed down to the Ray Valley and Silver Centre. Using Peter's map, my grandfather showed me where the town site mining structures were located, the location of the old railway spur line to Cobalt, and he reminisced about the people who used to work at Silver Centre and the contributions the Cobalt Mining Camp made to the world of mining and the development of Northern Ontario. I suspect this is exactly what Peter was hoping for. He strove to inspire people to not only reflect on our past, but to celebrate and cherish it. I didn't really get to know Peter formally until I started working at the Hailbury Heritage Museum in 1991. Peter was a tremendous supporter of the museum and made significant contributions to its collection. He was a wealth of knowledge, and I was like a sponge at the time. I wanted to soak it all in. We spent many hours talking about the history of our region, but we did more than just talk. Peter still had projects in mind. One of those projects was to locate Jake Davidson's cave in Matachewan. Jake Davidson had found gold in Matachewan in 1916, and his mine would later become the Young Davidson Mine Province. Davidson was an iconic prospector who had spent time up in the Yukon, but he disliked crowds and took more comfort in natural surroundings than the confines of a canvas tent. So he often used caves or rock outcroppings as a place of shelter. Bogart Leslie had worked in Matachewan in the 1940s, and he knew where Davidson's cave was. So on one of Peter's many trips up north, he picked Bogart and I up, and we headed off to Matachewan. So first we get up there, and our first stop was on the property itself. And Bogart didn't like Miss Whitty, who had he thought had done a lot of damage to the mine because she had gone in and taken out the crown pillars when she would own the mining company. And anyway, we get stopped by the security guard. And I thought we were in for trouble then. But somehow Peter was able to talk us out of that, and the next thing you know, everything was good. So we were on our way. We found Jake Davidson's cave, and there on the shore, Bogart went down into Davidson Creek, filled the 2 buckets. I think Peter was a little nervous, so he leaned over to me and said, "Make sure you boil the hell out of that water before we put the hot dogs in." But it was the best hot dog I've ever had in my life. There we were on the shores of Davidson Creek, outside the cave that Jake Davidson had lived in, and had hot dogs and boiled tea. Another project was delineating and mapping out the Mattaponic Trail. The Mattaponic Trail was an ancient portage used by Indigenous people for centuries to access Lake Temiskaming from the Montreal River. Mathematic roughly translates to place where the trail ends, and that place became Halebury, and that's really the area that we're in now. We decided that we were going to try and map out and walk the full Mathematic Trail from Sharp Lake down to Lake Temiskaming. And Bogart could outpass at night, he could outpace us in the bush, and I don't think he even broke a sweat in the 2.5-mile walk through some pretty rugged terrain. We had decided we'd try and pick up the trail at the north end of Sharp Lake, and Peter had a photograph of the Hudson's Bay Company encampment there that dated back from the late 1800s, and we were able to determine its approximate location. We then followed what a logging company had recently undertaken a clear cut, so the walking wasn't too bad for the first part of our trip. However, it was difficult to map out the trail precisely in this area because the equipment had done a lot of damage. But we were able to pick up the trail a little further on and even found the remnants of the corduroy road that would have been put in when supplies were being transported from the Halebury train station to the Edison mine on the Montreal River. And even though Peter lost his Tilly hat on that excursion, it was a great success and resulted in a map that Peter developed, which is now on display at the museum to document the trail for future generations to explore. My last little story is about the Mill Creek area, and you'll notice a number of the paintings here. It was an area that I think held a lot of significance to Peter, and he certainly shared that with me and inspired me in some of the work that I've done over the last 30 years in trying to promote the Mill Creek area and now what are known as the Mill Creek Cultural Grounds, where we've forged partnerships with our First Nations partners in trying to develop that area as an interpretive area and educational area, and really is an area that I think holds great potential for real tangible reconciliation. Peter was really the one who inspired me on that. We would take trips down, and not just to the cemetery, but down to the mouth of Mill Creek. His inspiration led to an archaeological assessment being done in 2003. We also spent a lot of time up at the waterfalls trying to exactly figure out where the mill was and talking about a very difficult time in our past. You know, the mill at Mill Creek was funded by the Department of Indian Affairs as a means of providing food for First Nations, for the Temiskaming First Nation. But Piché, who owned the mill at the time, was really scamming the federal government, the Department of Indian Affairs, and so you know that when I talk about reconciliation, it really is about trying to resolve those things that happened in the past. We can't ignore it, we can't change it, but I think we can do a lot to address it and make sure that it doesn't happen again in the future. And so to me, Mill Creek holds a very special place. And I think it held a very special place for Peter as well. And so this painting was given to me in 2007 by Peter. That was the year we opened City Hall. So it was a housewarming gift. I was clerk at the time here, and we had gone up the year before. So this was me. We were talking about where the mill might be, and Peter must have snapped a photograph of me from behind that I didn't know about, and then next year surprised me with that painting. So it's very special to me for a number of reasons, that it came from Peter and also was an area that I think held a lot of significance for both of us. Peter was a historian, a teacher, an artist, a mentor, and a friend. And I miss him very dearly. Several years ago, Peter wanted a sumac tree from the West Road for his garden. So out he came to my place with a shovel in hand, and in exchange, he brought me a lovely perennial that grows quite tall and has the most beautiful yellow flowers. This past week, as I was sitting having coffee on my deck, the flowers started to bloom. A yearly reminder that Peter's spirit and presence are never too far away. Like his writing, Peter's art is intended for us to reflect upon the beauty and the potential of this region. But I believe he also intended to inspire us to cherish what we have, inspire us to celebrate our past, and inspire us to embrace the future and to share Temiskaming's story with the world. Thank you.
And I think that good art is art that tells a story, that evokes an emotional response from you. And I think we see that here in Peter's work, in his use of color and light and form. There's energy in the room, certainly hope, I think. And absolutely, like Chris was saying, he inspires us to reflect on the beauty around us here in this very special place where we are, and to dream of a future that can be even better than our past. So I thank you all for coming. I do want to say a special thank you to our staff here at Temiskaming Art Gallery, who've done a tremendous amount of work to make this happen, as well as our volunteers who've helped out today to have this lovely celebration, and also those who've come to help us set up the exhibition. We are a pretty small crew, but we can do great things, I think. And so I want to say thank you to everyone who's helped. And a very special thank you to Peter's family. This exhibition couldn't have happened without you, and it's been very special for me. So thank you very much. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Sunday.